The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas the sanctity of the Parliament and lawfully constituted institutions and other public bodies are fundamental to our democracy and must be protected at all times, and whereas by a series of actions the UNC-led government of Trinidad and Tobago under the leadership of the Prime Minister has attacked and conspired to undermine key institutions of state, namely the judiciary, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the parliamentary opposition, and the media, and whereas other members of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, specifically the Attorney General and the Minister of Local Government, have also participated in such attacks against these important institutions of our democracy. Be it resolved that this House confirms its loss of confidence in the Prime Minister and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, in this motion, when I say House, I use it in the broadest possible sense. In the resolution it says, be it resolved that this House, and for clarity, Mr. Speaker, I am not talking about the 28 members on the other side, or the 12 on this side today. House here means the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, House for us.
Mr. Speaker, I trust.
A practice has developed in this Honourable House to speak to the public of Trinidad and Tobago and to speak to audiences outside of this Honourable House. When members rise to speak in this Honourable House, it is a conversation and discussion among the members of this House. And you direct your remarks to the chair. It has nothing to do with the people in terms of our discussions. So I just want members to know that you direct your remarks to the chair, and the discussions will be taking place among members of this Honourable House. Please be guided accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that you interrupted me, because I was expressing an opinion which I think I have a right to express. Had I not been interrupted, I was going on to point out that we are not here for our own benefit or of our own birthright. We are here as representatives of the people, and that's how we manage. And it's on that basis that we are put together as a house, as you have described. So I take no objection to your comment, Mr. Speaker, except that it was a bit previous, as Jamaicans would say. Mr. Speaker, however, the point, in fact, since you have put me there, I think I should begin my presentation by quoting a couple of understandings on my part. And I don't ask others to agree with me. And I speak to you, Mr. Speaker, so that you'll understand my understanding of my role in this House and my understanding of the role of this House in treating with the business of the people outside of this House. Mr. Speaker, I crave your indulgence at the beginning of this presentation to quote three statements from some very prominent people in the context of freedom of speech, which seems to be very apt at this point today. I want to quote from the speaker from Mays in the context of freedom of speech. And it says from Mays, subject to the rules of order in debate, a member may state whatsoever he thinks in debate, however offensive it may be to the feelings or injurious to the character of individuals. And he is protected by his privilege from any action for libel as well as any other questions or molestation. It is the personal responsibility of every member of Parliament to maintain those standards of conduct which the House and the electorate are entitled to expect, to protect the good name of the Parliament and to advance the public interest. I quote that, Mr. Speaker, to locate where we're at, particularly in the light of our beginning. I also want to quote from Enoch Powell, a very prominent Northern Ireland parliamentarian in the UK, when he said in May 1978, he had this to say on the same subject. It is part of the privilege of the House of Commons and individual members to say in this place not only what they would not say outside without the risk of process, but to be able to say that to which grave objection is taken by other honourable member. Unless an honourable member can do that, or if it was possible for his doing of it to be somehow undone, we would have lost our power to serve those who have sent us here. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I want to quote from one of your colleagues, the Speaker of the House in Australia, Speaker Snedden, who I am sure you're familiar with. And he had this to say: I feel that we do not need to invent any rules whereby a speaker or anybody else should make the judgment as to whether a member should be allowed to proceed with his privileged attack on an individual. It would not be within the capacity of a speaker to make a right judgment because he would not have the facts. He would not know. Therefore, the person raising the matter must bear the consequences himself. But I would not like to see that privilege limited or diminished in any way. All of us can think of not one, but many examples where if, had it not been for the freedom of speech and the attack on an individual in Parliament, crime would have gone undetected and unpunished. Some people who were being seriously disadvantaged by rapacious people would not have been protected had it not been for the freedom and absolute privilege that this chamber has to raise matters and to ventilate them so that inquisitorial efforts can be taken by other people and so that the matter can be circulated and the qualified privilege of the media will act. Mr. Speaker, Speaker Snedden went on to say, in the final analysis, however, it is for the member to resolve whether or not it is in the public interest to raise a matter in the House, and his or her own actions will be judged accordingly. That's where I am located today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the motion that I raised before this House is not brought here lightly, because I don't take serious business lightly. I have been in this House for 20-odd years, and that during that time, I have had to treat with matters of all kinds. And Mr. Speaker, this motion today is specific to the particular matters identified in this House. The government's action to the judiciary, the office of the DPP, the parliamentary opposition, and the media. Mr. Speaker, 6 months ago, or may I say a year ago, certain developments descended upon Trinidad and Tobago, which have caused a certain amount of unease, loss of confidence, discomfort. I refer specifically, Mr. Speaker, to the government attempting to pass legislation to reduce the backlog of cases in the court. That was over a year ago. I think it came to the House in November 2011. As a House, Mr. Speaker, we passed legislation and we went home. And we existed in relative comfort until during the period December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. There was no real problem in the country with respect to what the Parliament and the government had done. But something happened in August 2012 when the government secretly, surreptitiously, and unannounced proclaimed a select portion of that legislation that we passed in this House. And since then, Mr. Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has not been the same. A series of questions have been put to the government, for which today, Mr. Speaker, answers are still not forthcoming. A series of positions have been taken by the government, a lot of it quizzical, some of it inexplicable, some of it radical, but none of it brought comfort to the population to allow the people of Trinidad and Tobago to come to the conclusion once and for all that something was not right about what happened August 31st, 2012. The government still accused and still stands accused of having favored its friends, Mr. Speaker. The allegation against the government, Mr. Speaker, in this particular matter is that the government went out of its way knowingly to use its office to favor people who were friendly to the government. The specific allegation, Mr. Speaker, was that the government of Trinidad and Tobago destroyed the confidence of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. And while this was going on, Mr. Speaker, the population reacted. The population reacted. Thousands of persons took to the street in this country to express their concern and their disgust at what had happened, and more importantly, the government's inability to explain what it had done and why it did it. The government used its entire machinery and its overall control of the state and the private sector machinery to try to defend itself and to explain. But as I speak to you now, Mr. Speaker, nobody in the government has been able to answer a simple question. Why was Section 34 extracted surreptitiously, piecemeal, and in the face of all the evidence that it shouldn't have been done, including an assurance to the Parliament that we are in today? Why was it done? The government has never been able to answer that. And the government's effort was to tell us, let's move on. Mr. Speaker, this motion today is to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we can't move on. And based on what I'm going to put on the table today, Mr. Speaker, it will tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we should not move on until we get the answers to what we've been asking. Mr. Speaker, in response to these developments, I led a group to the President of Trinidad and Tobago, a group representing the opposition, other political interests, NGOs, and a significant chunk of the labor movement. And in October last year, we sought an audience and we told the President in the form of a formal complaint.
36-2, I was there and I thought it was en passant, but this is before the court. 36-2.
Yes, I am listening to the honourable member very closely. When I believe that he is going too far, as it relates to the sub judice rule, I'm very familiar with the case. I will advise accordingly. And I just, as I'm on my legs, may I advise, the name of the President of the Republic ought not to be introduced in debates in this House that could influence the outcome in one way or the other. So I want to caution members, the name of the President of the Republic consistent with the standing orders, ought not to be brought into debates in this honorable chamber. I advise accordingly. Continue, honorable member.